Freddie O'Connell is joining us in studio after a victorious night last evening. Freddie, congratulations.
Well, thanks, Matt. I'd say it's good to be with you, but this is the second Friday I've been with you, and there is not a beer in sight. I feel like I'm not the one making promises.
I figured after the deal, we head on off to Roberts or wherever you want to go, and kick down a few and see if we can turn Broadway into, I don't know, Bourbon Street. I don't know. I mean, whatever you want to do. Have you slept?
Not enough. I didn't pull an all-nighter, but I also, it was a late night and early morning.
Look, you and I established when we first began having conversation, before you announced that you were running for mayor, I believe it was, as a city councilman, you came on the show. And I appreciated the fact that you were willing to come on the show, despite the fact that you and I probably are going to disagree about a lot regarding politics. And I still appreciate that about you. However, I'm curious if you have any thoughts as to why our audience is largely conservative. The conservatives gravitate to Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I've never described myself as a conservative. I'm a libertarian. But why do you think why do you think some of them don't care for you?
I mean, look at where we were in the campaign. You saw two different stages of the race, the general election, the runoff election. And sometimes it's easier to believe what other people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's one of those things where most of what I try to do is make sure that I am, building trust with as large a group of people. Now, I will say, I felt like we had a pretty comfortable margin of victory, but we also know that politics almost never produces a consensus, right? But, I feel like a pretty good margin last night says we got the support of a clear, basically supermajority of Nashville.
64%. So what do you do as mayor to work not to abandon your values and your principles and the things that brought you here, but to reach out that olive branch and say, hey, I'm the mayor of all of Nashville, whatever you consider yourself, conservative, liberal, progressive, Republican, Democrat. So how do you do that? How do you start that process?
So I think this comes down to three principles: fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability. I think people looking at my record, looking at the way I've approached the budget process while on Metro Council, the stadium deal for the Titans, the times where I have called out things that were clearly not delivering on an accountability process, we're going to try to continue all of those in the mayor's office.
You talked about this last night in your victory speech, but I want you to, to go over some of this with us today. Priorities. The campaign's done. Now it's time to get to the business of governing. Right. What are the priorities of the O'Connell administration?
Yeah. So what we talked about last night were three big themes, and they were consistent with what we've heard from Nashvillians all over the city. Nashvillians want to see a local government that's more effective. We watch everything from flooding on streets after a high rain to failures on trash collection, to just the sense that our customer service operation, the tools like 311 and Hub Nashville aren't as effective. We want to get that to a better spot. We talked about how Nashville grows. We know that the next mayor is going to be intensely invested in the process of the East Bank and supporting the Titans playing football there by 2027. That's going to be a focus, but it cannot be the only focus. We have to make sure that we are taking care of the entire city, and that means that the only investments we make over the 4 years can't just be on the East Bank and in service to that new neighborhood. We've got to remember the neighborhoods that are a part of Nashville's strength over the 60-year history of Metro and before that as a city. The final one is how we move. We're coming through a process where we're the last major American city without a meaningful transit system, where we've got so many neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, and last year was sadly the deadliest year on record for pedestrians, and we continue to lose people with unsafe driving and the challenge of some of our infrastructure choices. We want to have safer infrastructure and better mobility options for folks.
I'm looking at a Fox Nashville, the Fox 17 poll, unscientific, obviously, because it's online, but the poll says, what topic should Nashville's next mayor make a top priority? And they gave four choices: homelessness, affordable housing, crime, and education. You want to guess which one?
Homelessness? Crime. Yeah, sorry.
48.7% say that your focus should be on the crime issues. We see across the country some of our urban areas having significant issues with crime and homelessness, and I think sometimes those things go hand in hand. What can you, as mayor of Nashville, do? Because that's kind of a feel thing, right? I mean, even if the perception doesn't match the reality, if the perception is that there's a crime problem, that'll keep people away.
It's the hardest part. It's something that you have to give confidence to residents about. It's the thing that you have to give confidence to business about, to your point. The top job of a mayor in government is to keep people safe, and that is something I am committed to. I've already had a great exchange with Chief Drake this morning. I think if you look at the things that we have chosen to invest in on a public safety basis over the past year or two in particular, they have involved more pay for first responders and police in particular. They have involved more personnel. We know we've got a new precinct coming online in Southeast Nashville. We've got the Entertainment District Initiative and a new facility for them to try to keep some of the pressure off of that entertainment district from a public safety perspective. We have made investments in equipment and facilities, and I think those are all paying off alongside the investments we've made in mental health and kind of the on-the-ground, like traffic calming and lighting improvements in areas where we know crime is concentrated.
So we discussed the last time you were here the concept of LPRs, and you explained while you want to give the tools to Chief Drake that Chief Drake needs, you had some continued concerns. What are next steps regarding license plate readers?
So we're in a process of review. To his credit, Mayor Cooper was intent on ensuring that regardless of whether Alice or I won, he had reached out to both of us as candidates and kind of gave a briefing. The first decisions to make there will probably be spending decisions about implementation, and I'm looking forward to reviewing how we get this done in the most responsible and transparent way. I think one of the things that was missing from the pilot period was we never came back to the table as a city and said, did we get it right? We just kind of got a presentation of some data and said, now let's vote.
So you obviously will be sitting down with Chief Drake and having further discussions about the particulars of things like this.
Right.
And I would expect that in those discussions, you'll also talk about the concepts of staffing, and as that relates to school safety. And you and I have had those discussions as well. Walk me through what you hope to get out of those discussions.
I mean, I would say as we go through this with Metro government as a whole, we want to prioritize. I mean, we know it is important to Nashvillians that I've said out loud many times, it's important to both feel safe and be safe. There will be opportunities as we come into this next budget to understand what Chief Drake's priorities are as the chief of police. I think it's going to be one of the most important partnerships that exists in the city is the relationship between the mayor and the chief, and we'll be looking at that. But he's been very targeted on how we grow the department to staff a new precinct, to staff the Entertainment District Initiative focused on downtown and kind of the large number of requests for service that come in, as well as the number of special events we get. And I think the next piece of that puzzle is to make sure I would rather be in a position where we know from a pay and personnel standpoint and from a recruitment and retention standpoint, Chief Drake can go forward with confidence to say at any given moment, if we know we have a public safety need that is a priority of his, that we can at least say, well, it's not a funding issue.
Homelessness is not obviously an issue that's unique to Nashville. We see it across the United States of America. It seems to be growing across the United States. But I note that in Nashville we have a couple of areas of concern that the folks that listen to the show regularly talk about. Brookmead Park is one of them. Mm-hmm. In Hermitage, in that area, there's another encampment. What can you as mayor to try to help some of these folks get out of this situation that they find themselves in, and at the same time protect the citizens that are in these communities that find themselves in these encampments?
And the same is true of downtown and around the city, right? When illegal activity is occurring, or whether you have a public health or a public safety issue, it is important to address those with appropriate urgency. And so you do not want a scenario that is allowing illegal activity. You do not want a scenario to unfold that is causing public health issues, whether that is, hey, trash is accruing and now suddenly you've got a vermin issue or something like that. So we always want to be attentive to that no matter where people are, whether they're in an encampment or in downtown and congregating in places. But I will say one of the things we did this year that is incredibly important is we set up for the first time ever a standalone Office of Homeless Services. It is funded in this budget. Mayor Cooper made an important choice to use some of our one-time federal money to architect a $50 million investment in mitigating homelessness. And it includes some long-term housing options for the people that are hardest to house, some temporary housing options, as well as some services. But there are frustrations along the way. You've probably seen the stories about these pods that we expected to use as one of those forms of temporary housing. We've had some complexity in the state and local relationship and the ability to use those. We want to continue to sort through that, because when we've got resources that can help people, get people out of encampments, get them into environments where they may be able to clean up, sober up, get the services they need, and stay housed, we ought to be taking advantage of that.
I saw a recent story. It was on either Fox 17 or News Channel 5, I forget which, that the citizens around Brookmead are concerned that the city did not do enough to repair some of the issues that led to the encampment being there to begin with. In other words, they're concerned that the improvement status is just going to lead to people coming right back into the park. What can you as mayor do to kind of calm those fears that we're going to see a resurgence of that encampment as it existed prior to the cleanup?
I'd say one of the greatest success stories we have, and we need to look very carefully at how we replicate this, is I don't think you were in Nashville yet when we had some of the greatest issues here, but Church Street Park, which when I took office in 2015, I declared out loud was a failed public space. I mean, it was not a space that was available to all as a public space, and we wound up systematically changing the management of it. And so often, if you have constant activation of a public space, if you have programming there, if it is staffed appropriately, if you set an expectation, people can be there. And not all of them are going to be housed. And I will say up front, I mean, I had a guy I visited with at the polls who I feel like was clearly expressing the idea that just lacking a home is itself a crime. I don't look at that, but I will say as soon as you tip into other activities, then it's important to be addressing it seriously. It's not a problem to me if somebody who is unhoused is in a park or public space, but it's about the expectation you set. If you go over to Church Street Park today, you will probably see a mix of things. You will see some of the programming that's there. You will see a staffing element. You will see not an encampment. You will see not people storing their belongings there for longer than it would be reasonable to go into the library and come back out. It's working again.
Revisit, you and I talked about this last time you were here, but revisit, because several people asked, we kind of touched on a little bit, your relationship with Chief Drake, the staffing shortages that they have as it relates to SROs in elementary schools, and the relationship between the mayor and Dr. Battle with regard to that decision-making process.
Right. So I think that's where I look to them as key leaders of the two, frankly, biggest parts of the metro budget, and to me, therefore, two of the biggest priorities we have as a city, schools and safety. I am going to lean into trusting their judgment, frequently working in partnership, and me being involved in that conversation to figure out what the right model is. If they agree that we should have more SROs, I'll come back to the point I made earlier. I don't want that to be something where the chief feels compelled to say, we would do this, but for we lack either the personnel or the funding. We want to figure out that strategy. If that's a recruitment and retention issue, we want to make sure that we upgrade the process, because we know that recruiting law enforcement is going to be critical to the long-term success of the department.
What, if any, efforts do you plan on making as mayor of Nashville to repair or strengthen the relationship between the city and the state?
So I would say personally that's already underway. One of the things that was most encouraging to me over the past 24, 48 hours has been the number of direct contacts I've had with key leaders in the state. I've heard from senior officials in the governor's office. I've heard from Speaker Sexton personally. I've heard from representatives of a variety of people. I've heard from the comptroller and secretary of state. I think there is a remarkably strong appetite for recalibrating this relationship. I expect to be a part of that. I want to govern responsibly and find every point of common ground that can be found between Metro and the state of Tennessee, because I think all of this works best is when Nashville is at its best economically and, from all of the things we've talked about, from safety, from education, from infrastructure standpoint, when the region is collaborating, our 10-county area. I've heard from Mayor Pitts in Clarksville. I had an opportunity to meet, as did Alice, with the Greater Nashville Regional Council's Mayor's Caucus. I'm expecting to invest personally in that. To me, this is an opportunity, and it's one I'm cautiously optimistic about right now.
With that in mind, there were votes held on the part of the General Assembly to shrink the size of the city council. Mm-hmm. Where is that on your radar screen, and do you anticipate discussions as the mayor? I mean, I understand there's a slightly different relationship now that you're mayor as opposed to being on the Metro Council, but right. Where are you on that?
I think where we are right now is we know that a decision was made by the courts to protect the 40-member body at least through the election cycle of 2023, right? So the election we just concluded yesterday and began on August 3rd, that had a 40-member Metro Council with 5 at-large council seats. It is less clear to me, and I think we're still waiting on a final decision as the legal, now that we are clear of the election, there will probably be a resumption of the discussion of, does this state law now apply in 2027, or is it fully invalidated? I don't think the answer to that is fully known yet. I'd say from the standpoint of looking at Metro Legal and defending Nashville's interests, it may be the Department of Law carries forward a challenge to that on the basis of, hey, we already have the tool to decide this for ourselves. If it were to fail under home rule, I would stand by the decision. If it turns out that we are legally required to implement that, then I would think that the next best step to take as a city is to go through a not rushed planning process like we went through before, where it was like in 30 days we had to not just review and approve maps, but hey, let's do this the responsible way, the way we just did a comprehensive redistricting. The planning department will go out, they will work with current council members, they will work with communities, and they will come up with the best possible maps.
I mean, this might be a little unfair, but I mean, now that you're mayor, does your calculus kind of change? Because it would occur to me that if you're trying to push forward an initiative through the Metro Council, it's easier to herd 20 cats than it is 40. If there's,
I've heard arguments,
you know what I'm saying?
I've heard arguments both ways, because it is actually historical analysis of, looking at the math on this, some people have looked at it and said it's actually harder to marshal a coalition to oppose in a 40-member body than in a 20-member body, because you might only need 11 people to stand together, whereas 21 is harder to assemble. I guess I would say I don't really care. I mean,
it doesn't change your agenda.
It doesn't change our priorities. It doesn't change the relationship I hope to have with the individual people that are on the body, whether it's 40 members or 20 members.
Freddie O'Connell's with us for a few more moments. Got to take a quick time out. We've got him for about 3 minutes after that. He is the newly elected mayor of the city of Nashville. A few more moments with Freddie O'Connell is the newly elected mayor of the city of Nashville, having a good discussion about his priorities as he sets to take over the mayor's office. How does that process work? Help me understand that. I mean, what's you're still technically a councilman, I guess, until you become the mayor, or what's the deal?
Bizarrely, today, as I sit here with you, I am a civilian fully, because I retired from the Metro Council officially on August 31st, and my successor was sworn in, and he took office September 1st. So right now, today, I'm just, I won an election.
Citizen Freddie. When do you take the oath?
So the Metro Charter is actually silent on when a mayor takes office, what the transition process is, or any of that. So there is no date certain by which I must take office. There are basically a set of assumptions and practices.
Yeah, at some point you have to tell Cooper to get out, right? So
right. That's I think the conversation will probably go a little differently from that. But so the way I look at it is the very first Metro Council meeting of the next term is October 3rd. We probably need to be in effect where we've got a new government starting to operate before that. So The Election Commission appears to be ready to certify the results a week from today on September 22nd. After that, we can work on a schedule coordinated with Mayor Cooper's office about the swearing in process. For me personally, and then we'll probably have, again, a tradition in Nashville has been to kind of have almost a joint swearing in and inauguration so that all 40 council members, the vice mayor, the mayor, are all ceremoniously sworn in, and then it's an inauguration event. And then by that October 2nd, council committees are underway. October 3rd, we have the first council meeting of the term, and then we're off and running.
Yeah, I mentioned to you during the break that when I announced that you're coming on to be with us, some in our audience look at you and characterize you. The words that I hear liberal and I hear progressive. Do you think those are fair characterizations, and how do you respond to that characterization?
I don't try, generally speaking, to self-describe a lot. In fact, it was the funniest thing that we had a conversation about whether we should even try to put any of those labels up as a part of the campaign. And I think there was one place on the website where we used the word progressive, but generally it's not a thing I try to do. If other people want to use labels to help them, filter the world, it's fine with me, however they want to do that. I have been told by colleagues on the Metro Council that I'm too conservative. I've been told by friends on the left the same thing. I've certainly been told by plenty of conservatives that I'm a socialist. And yet there is a socialist on the council, and it was never me. And so the way I look at it is, I grew up in a Tennessee where bipartisanship was the goal, right? We had the legendary Howard Baker as kind of a beacon of this process. We've had multiple people at statewide leadership and on down the chain, from Ned McWhirter to Lamar Alexander to Phil Bredesen. And I would say that's a fading tradition. It's hard for me, having grown up here, to watch it fade. I think it's generally good. I will say, I don't think any specific ideological perspective holds claim to all good ideas. Some people prefer their ideology and do not want to stray out of it. I really have always enjoyed, in the work that I've done, hearing perspectives that differ from mine, because to me, it's how we learn. And if we know that something isn't working, it's a great example of exploring other ways to make things work better.
I just got this, and I want to read it to you, and I want to get your. JB writes, he's not even from Tennessee. That's what he wrote.
I'm sure this was, you know what? This episode of the Matt Murphy Show is going to be amazing, because what it's going to lead is to some birth certificate trutherism. But yes, in fact, I was born at Baptist Hospital. And here, I'll go ahead and create a controversy for you. There is no Baptist Hospital. Yeah, it's St. Thomas Midtown now. Sorry, everybody.
So you were born and raised?
Yes, born and raised right here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Wanted to put that.
My mother and her sister were born and raised in Dixon, Tennessee. So we're raising a couple third-generation Tennesseans.
You know, I can't have you in studio without holding your feet to the fire on what is next for the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway project. Yep. And the council. Obviously, as mayor, you're going to have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, and the good news, again, is in preparing for this moment, because we knew this conversation was active, we thought there may have been a possibility that the Metro Council would pick up a deal that was a partnership between Bristol Motor Speedway and the Cooper administration. I have talked to the Bristol folks. I have talked to the Nashville SC folks. It seems to me like both parties are saying that a path forward may be possible that has a speedway at its heart. And so I am still personally very interested in pursuing that.
Freddie, thank you. Let's do this again. Get some sleep, get some rest, and I appreciate you being on. I'm going to get beat up for the next 2.5 hours over you making an appearance on this show.
Talk to Congressman Ogles, and here, you know what you can do? You can get a photograph of the handshake.
Oh yeah, well, my handshake with Andy or my handshake with you?
My handshake with Andy if he's out here.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you, Freddie.
All right, thank you.
Again, congratulations. There's the next mayor of Nashville, Freddie O'Connell. We'll be back in a moment. Andy Ogles coming up at 1:00 this time.